segments on Backyard Farmer, we've taken a look at what sorts of containers you can use in your landscape, some of the combinations of things you could put in those containers, and today what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at how some of these things are doing as we enter the summer months. This is a really great example of some of the things that are going to take the hot, dry conditions, the windy conditions. They're in great scale with the environment. There's a lot of color combinations that work, and there's a lot of design continuity. We have things like the Cooler Series Vinca, which comes in great hot colors as well as white, and white is an excellent color in the evening. We have the sweet potatoes, which have been popular for years and years. We have Margarita and either Ace of Spades or Blackie in here. Those will trail over the planters as the season progresses and actually probably drip all the way down to the pavement if the owners want them to. We have a little fine textured plant called Bacopa, and this one gives a little bit of green but also has those sparkles of white to it. These are the sorts of things that if you have been lucky enough to pick this kind of combination in your own situation, chances are all you're really going to have to do for the rest of the summer is a little bit of deadheading if you want to, and watering when we're really in droughty conditions. The Downtown Lincoln Association and Master Gardeners, working through the state and Lancaster County, have been taking care of these planters for several years, as well as planting them in the first place. And as you can see, some of the conditions are really dreadful. This is as hot and as dry as it can be. Water is an issue, so the plant combinations here have to actually look better as the season progresses. One of the neat things that we've been noticing is what does and does not survive in containers like this over several winters, and we've found pretty limited success with the ornamental grasses. There are a couple of situations where we've had some switchgrass come back, maybe one of the maiden grasses, and a little bit of little blue stem, but none of the others really have come back. On the other hand, the Russian sage has been pretty good about coming back every single year. And for those of you who want to include that in a planter, that's a really good thing for you to consider as long as it's, again, hot and dry. Another neat thing about this planter is we have one of the new helichrysums or licorice plants called icicles. It's actually so happy it's blooming, which you don't see very often. And then finally, we have a plant that in any other situation, and if it were not one of the selections, it would be considered a weed. This is actually a purslane. So if we had Rock out here with his can of something to spray with, he might be wanting to kill it. On the other hand, if you look at it, it's going to bloom through the entire season and really make this planter look great. A lot of people have containers in the shade, and we tend to think of the same combinations of begonias, impatiens, those sorts of things. But as you'll notice, this is a full shade container, and the things in it are pretty much all foliage plants. We have the Marguerite sweet potato again that is really happy in the shade. Our tall spiky thing in this instance is a canna, and this is one of the ones that's variegated. The cool thing about cannas is that they come in all sorts of colors of foliage and bloom. They'll take shade, they'll take full blazing sun, and they can also be used in a container water garden or as a bog plant. If you really want to hold them over the winter, it is one of those plants that you can dig and take into the house and keep and then bring back again. The other thing we have in this particular shade combination is one of the coleuses. We have lots and lots of foliage types to choose from now. You'll notice this one is pretty subtle, and it picks up on the kind of the deep burgundy purple color that is in the stripe in the canna leaf. And then finally, we've thrown in some hostas. Again, these are chosen not for their flower in this instance, but for being able to give another bit of foliage characteristic to it. We haven't had any good luck with the hostas overwintering in the big containers, but these are pretty exposed, and it may be one of those situations where you have an area that is a little bit more protected over the winter. You could very well have the hostas over the winter. I want to point out one other thing, and that is that these containers are mulched pretty heavily with peat moss. It certainly holds the soil in place. It looks great. It does tend to pack down a little bit, and we have had some issues across the state. In fact, we had a call about a woman whose container actually caught on fire in the middle of the night. So just like compost can generate enough heat to catch on fire, a situation with what you mulch with a container, you have to be pretty careful that you don't set up a situation that is unsafe. We want to end our segment on containers by looking at something a little bit smaller than the great big ones we saw downtown. These are the Hypertufa containers that we talked about earlier in the season on Backyard Farmer. And you can see how great they look now as we're heading into the heat of the summer, filled with all sorts of tiny plants, some grasses, some thyme. Hens and chicks, of course, the stones make a big difference in how these look. There's a wide array of different sizes and shapes, all of them planted with different sorts of little plants. Great portability, they can go on the patio, they can go on a table, an end table, you can move them around even in a water environment such as this is. We also have some wonderful examples of other small containers, and in fact one is almost an outdoor room, one that has little teeny tiny almost doll-like furniture in it, could sit on a desk in an office, could again sit on a patio or on an end table, those sorts of things, as opposed to being a giant sort of a container. And finally, one of the things that is really interesting is to take something that might look like a wall box or a window planter out of wood. That one has actually been filled with a whole variety of different types of plants of different colors, including a vine. And the great thing about this sort of container is it's very portable as well. You can set it by a front door, you can attach it to a fence, you can move it from sun to shade, make it a very, very versatile addition to any sort of a landscape. So I think in closing, what we want to really take a look at or think about is how containers are the kinds of things that can really enhance the landscape. They're very personable and very personal, especially if you put furniture in them and those sorts of things, and they're something that can be customized to any sort of situation or landscape that you have.